We have a training topic today as well as a case review. But before we do that, we're going to approve the minutes from September meeting. Has everybody had a chance to look over those? Clay?
Yes.
Hey. All in favor? That was very difficult.
It's rough.
Yes. All right, to keep us on schedule, which we are, we're gonna open up the meeting with comments from board members and commission liaisons. Do we have anybody on a commission, Clay? Would you feel okay about getting us started off, Clay?
Yeah, I have no report from the police commission. I did deliver our report from the CRB to the police commission, and our commission meeting is canceled. The police commission meeting is canceled this Thursday. So I will not be there because it will be canceled. That's about it.
Thank you, Clay.
Yeah.
We'll go clockwise. Yeah. I'd like to welcome the folks who I don't recognize here today and give you an opportunity to introduce yourselves and say hi. Can we start on the?
Owen Griffith, I'm a sergeant in BPD. I'm moving into Sergeant Peckle's spot in IA.
I'm Wilson Jordan. I am moving to the spot in the professional standards division.
Joel Peckles, who's the investigating IA supervisor. I'm thanks for that.
Thank you all for being here. I really appreciate your time. I'd just like to say shout out to Lindsay, Rob, Beatrice, Amanda, and Mark for keeping the ship running. Thank you.
Yeah, I want to echo that. I want to thank Beatrice, Rob, and Lindsay for keeping the ship running, doing the work. I think that's why Leo was part of why Leo was able to be so successful is this team that she had built. Sad to see her go, but I'm glad that Leo's still here. I do want to welcome Mark. It was nice to meet you. Oh, and Amanda, sad to see Vicky leave, but I'm glad that Amanda is here helping send in those documents earlier this month. At the beginning of last meeting, I was talking about the Pride event and some complaints. After the meeting, the deputy chief speak about Pride event and footage. I'm more comfortable about what had happened that day. I think I have a clearer perspective that the claim that perhaps that there was an escort not true, and that there was not a witnessing of a Pride member or somebody who was attending Pride. So those two things I'm comfortable saying. It's my hope that Pride and the department can get together to make next year run smoothly. I'm not sure where we are with that. I know they met last Friday. I'm willing to be a liaison in any way without overstepping any boundaries, being on the board, but I do think that it's important that I was there in some capacity. The deputy chief, soft target, and I think that's going to be true whether it happens there. Those are my.
I think the only thing I wanted to share is just kind of holding space for the tone of our nation, where everyone fits. And just recognizing that there's kind of probably a lot of feelings and knowledge that has been flavoring the conversations and how it carries be concerned. So expect that may enter just even the cultural sense.
Thank you. Mark, since you're back with us, would you do you have anything to say? Welcome back.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be back. There, I worked here since 2009 to 2020. And I had been involved in police oversight since 1986. So almost 40 years for the most part. Done it at the local level, at the federal level, the international level, provincial level in other states, but we don't really do it at the end of the United States in our country don't really do it very much. So it's a pleasure to be back. I hired Leah about 10 years ago, 10, 12 years ago. And so they offered the opportunity, and I had expressed some interest in filling in for her until there's a permanent replacement, so I was happy to do that. If anybody has any questions or anything at any time, call me, email me, text me, whatever you'd like to do. I'll be more than happy to answer. Been doing it a long time. Every now and then there's a surprise. But for the most part, really appreciative of certainly, excuse me. So, primary reasons I came back is I've known Lindsay for a long time. Hired Beatrice. He was here when I got here, so I knew it was great staff and I think a lot of you as well, so. Kind of fun to be here, this is when I'm going, so. And my temporary contract can go through into March, depending on how the whole wiring process works, that's not that, so. But again, if you have any questions or check it too, anything, just please bring them to my attention, and I'll be more than happy to answer them for you.
Thank you. All right, we have about 15 to 20 minutes for a training topic on DUI investigation with Sergeant Gordon. I'd like to invite Sergeant Gordon to the table and yeah, present.
Okay, so I kind of prepared to give a little overview of DUI process and then just also take some questions if you all have any kind of questions about it. So that's kind of where I'm going to start. If there's any correction to that or anything different you'd like to see, I'm happy to adjust. Just let me know. So the typical DUI process for officers at UP, it's going to basically start with either a excuse me, a traffic stop or maybe a crash or a citizen calling in. So it's a call for service or it's a traffic stop that an officer initiates. From there, the officer is going to make contact with the driver. And at that point, they're going to start kind of their investigation beyond what they might have already observed or what information other people have observed. And then once they have that initial interaction, they're going to determine whether they want to do standardized field sobriety tests, which are taught at DPSST, and as the name would imply, they're very standardized. And there's a reason for that because it's scientifically backed and it should be done the same way every time. And then from there, they're going to determine they have probable cause. Some of them may already have probable cause before the FSTs, and then they'll make their decision. If they have probable cause, they make an arrest. If they don't, the person goes or the investigation continues if it was a crash or there's other stuff to be dealt with. And so if the person is arrested, then generally they're transported, taken in custody, transported to the headquarters or maybe they'll go to the jail. Sometimes things are really crowded at headquarters and the jail has a separate processing area to do the breath test. And so it's an option. It's not as frequently used. And so once at headquarters, very likely, they're going to go through the steps to provide a request of breath test. And if the person consents to that, they go through that process and then they do all the paperwork. And then they give the person all the paperwork, explain it all, and then send them on their way. And what that looks like is not just kicking them out the door, it's releasing them to a sober person, sober driver, a ride service, things like that. And then, or if they're gonna be lodged at jail, we'll take them to the jail and lodge them there. In a rare circumstance, they might take the person to Buckley, because we're not able to guarantee that they have somewhere to go or a safe way to get there, so. So that's the basics. Any questions about that?
Me too, I'm curious, what are the considerations for lodging someone in jail?
It's a great question. I think it ultimately is up to officer discretion. But I know also it will depend on if there are other charges pending. So like if it's a crash, if someone gets injured, if there was reckless driving added. Also, I think it depends on the level of DUI. So most DUIs, your first one's gonna be a misdemeanor. Second one will be a misdemeanor, but there are cases where you can have a felony, right? And those people are more likely to be lodged.
And then what kind of training, discussions, or conversations are we having about how to use discretion? So it's the.
So I guess I can't really speak to that. I mean, because yeah, I'm not sure if I can speak to that in terms of like, we hire officers who are hopefully reasonable and able to determine what scenarios might, be one of those factors like we talked about. So, I think that goes to the field training, the academy, you know what I mean?
So there are like formalized.
No.
Oh, wait, what kind of training or conversations have we had about, not just necessarily with you, but in general communicating? Or formalized conversation about that.
I mean, not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
You?
Yeah.
Can you tell us what it is?
Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm getting wild. So Buckley is actually a detox facility. It's been a major, it's been widely used in Eugene for a long time. Cahoots utilizes it, and so it's basically a safe place that we can take people who often want to go there to sober up, or they want to go check in to get treatment, but then there's also secure rooms where we can take people who are just needing that extra level of supervision when they sober up, they might need medical support, stuff like that.
So it's super.
Well, yes, I mean, if they're against their will, they have to be supervised for safety. But, yeah.
Thank you.
Talk a little bit about, does everybody get a breathalyzer?
Well,
And
that's.
if someone refuses, what happens?
Yeah. So yes, the first step of every DUI is going to be do the breathalyzer. And we do live in Eugene, so we know that not every impaired person who is arrested for DUI is consuming alcohol. And so in that case, sure, breath test wouldn't really tell us much. And so at that point, it would go to the next step, which is requesting a urine sample. A urine sample is going to provide information as to other substances that are being metabolized in the person's system. And after that, we would also request a drug recognition expert to come and do a secondary evaluation on the person. Drug recognition experts, DREs, they have pretty extensive training, at least a month, I'm gonna say 3 weeks to a month of kind of just school. There's a preschool, and then there's a standard main DRE school, and then there's a whole week of kind of certification testing where they go through and they do test evaluations and a control. And so they're trained to look at things like physiological factors, pupils, blood pressure, temperature, muscle, rigidity or laxity, and then things beyond that too, just observations of the person's affect and demeanor and how they're carrying themselves and things like that. So we'll go to that step. If the person refuses the breath test, then the officer generally applies for it. That's where blood draw might be. if granted.
Can you talk a little bit about the 15-minute waiting period?
Yeah, the 15 minutes is, it's like, it's part of the standardization of all of that, and that's to make sure that they haven't consumed anything, taken anything into their mouths prior to the breath test that could alter the results of the breath test. That includes things like consuming alcohol or food or other drinks. It includes vomiting, any type of kind of extra saliva, things like that. And now even fingernails, if people are chewing on their nails. So I mean, it's designed to make sure that the test can be as accurate as possible.
Thank you.
Okay.
Something I'm curious about is how, like how common is it to do a DUI or something?
Oh, it's becoming very common.
And like what, how? The urine samples, how you go about that?
So basically, we get these urine kits, just the same as we would get blood kits from OSB. They supply all of those to every agency in the state. And, so we get a sealed box that has a urine cup in it. That's sealed. The person is provided that cup, and they're provided privacy. They're provided pretty stringent instructions in terms of nothing but urine in the cup. And they're given an admonishment of if you put anything other than urine in the cup, say dipping the cup in water, that would be considered tampering with evidence, because it's evidence of a criminal case at that point. And so then they're given the privacy, and then they hand the urine to the officer, and the officer secures it and then lodges it for testing. Yeah. Yeah.
Are there any situations, say, sergeant arrests someone for DUI? Are there any situations in which then the sergeant has direct contact with the Department of Motor Vehicles, either by email, phone call, follow-up, anything like that? Say, for example, someone refuses to take a test. Is it the arresting officer's responsibility to notify the Bureau of Motor Vehicles or Department of Motor Vehicles, or any other situation in which the arresting officer is required to contact them?
I'm not completely sure I follow, but I think, I don't know about that scenario. Oh, well, we do have, that's one of the paperwork that we do. It's the ICCR, which is the implied consent combined report. So we fill that out when we do the test, and make sure that the person gets a copy, and that's kind of in their packet of paperwork, and then we deliver the other copy to our sergeant's basket. The sergeant approves it, takes it to records, and then records forwards it off to the DMV.
So after that, there's generally not much.
Not that I'm aware of typically.
Sergeant or not be in contact with them. Under those circumstances, the record is the conduit.
Generally, that wouldn't hurt, but it does occasionally. Typically, if we have a crash that results in death, maybe the manslaughter case or something like that, the driver of the involved vehicle suspected to be a Dewey driver. It does happen occasionally where they'll request that being hearing would be canceled against. That way you're not going in and having discovery stuff occurring between the defense and the officer at that point. So that does happen occasionally.
Who would make that?
I'm not even sure. It could be the arresting officer, it could be the investigating detective.
So it's possible, what I'm saying, it's possible that, say you charge someone with manslaughter, or then you later learn that Department of Motor Vehicles may be conducting a driver's license suspension, and you as the arresting officer on the manslaughter case would be that conduit to the Department of Motor Vehicles about
Potentially.
we have a pending.
Just good, because that's just an administrative hearing. So it doesn't affect the criminal side of it, which the judge in the end can suspend the license anyways.
So that wouldn't be the responsibility of the district attorney office?
No, because typically it's the investigating officer that represents themselves for the most part, the DMV, in the DMV hearings.
Good. I don't know if I have anything else to offer then.
Oh, I have a couple.
Oh,
So
okay.
and you might answer. Been a long day. You have a specific DUI officers, right?
We have in the past, it's a little staffing and stuff. Sorry. Right. So sorry. So we have in the past had a dedicated DUI enforcement, but I think with staffing that has become less and less consistent. I know there are, I think on certain nights that do that, but it's less common than it used to be.
The specific training that officers get in DUI
In general, or to be the
General.
right part?
and or specific, yeah.
Okay. It starts at the DPSST State Academy. And so they get the general standardized field sobriety test instruction. They get a whole module on how to do DUIs. And they also get a module on drugs that impair driving. So that's the basic kind of start of the academy. And then when they come back, theoretically, they should be getting training with an FTO while they're in their FTEP period. And I think most people get a handful of DUIs during that period of time. After that, there's another course that a lot of officers opt to take, which is completely voluntary, optional. It really depends on the officer's interest. And that's called the A-RIDE, and that's Advanced Roadside Impaired Drivers Enforcement Education. I don't know. That's kind of like the drugs that impair driving, but like the next level up, and that's kind of the precursor to being a DRE. And so then there are officers that could go on and become drug recognition experts from them. So I mean, that's kind of the progression of training. A lot of people are kind of in the basic, I don't want to say basic, but that first kind of group of training, get your academy training. And you can still be very productive and good at what you do, just utilizing those principles and going out and doing DUIs. So, and like everything.
You do any in-service annually or biannually?
Yeah, we make sure that anybody that is SFST certified, we generally speaking, I'm pretty sure we've done this every year. We do a refresher course, which is taught by a DPSST certified SFST instructor. And so, and then we also encourage people to make sure their intellectualizer cards are up to date. Sometimes that's hard when people are in their assignments like detectives or, certain special assignments, but for the most part, everybody's trained up on that and stay certified and they go to work.
Can I ask you about, with regards to DUI stops, is it safe to assume that those are different than like your kind of traditional non-DUI stops?
Not necessarily. I think a lot of them start with the same things that a lot of traffic stops start with, and that's a little driving behavior that you notice, and then you follow the car to make a stop on them, and then you notice other things, and then you go talk to them, and that sort of pulls all those details you already observed together, and you're thinking, oh, this person might be distracted or this, but then you're thinking, oh, but I smell alcohol, or I see their pupils are big. And that's where it kind of deviates, I guess. But for the most part, it should be very standard, like any other traffic stop.
Thank you. What kind of training do you think officers with regard to handling evidence, what counts as evidence?
I mean, I think they in their pre-academy, they go through a module with our evidence and learn those principles on how to collect it, how to maintain the chain of custody, all the kind of basics. They learn a little bit at the academy too. That's been a while. Since I was there. And so they learned that, those principles there, and then, you know, what our policies and procedures are once they come. So, yeah. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
My question was with regard to, a evidence is a kind of fulcrum in this investigation. And so, yeah, I mean, if it's okay, if we have questions during our discussion, we invite you back to the table.
I guess training discussions, whatever, about not jeopardizing kids.
I mean, I would hope nobody would jeopardize the case, and it's theoretically supposed to be part of everybody's practice and procedure and protocol, right? I mean, yeah, I guess I haven't really ever thought of having to train on that. All the training is for that. Creating a good prosecuted case. I don't know if that answered that.
Thank you.
Okay,
I think we have time for one more question. Clay, do you happen to have any questions?
No, I have no questions on this subject.
Wanted to make sure you had the opportunity to. talk about it.
I appreciate it. Well, one thing is I appreciate you asking whether we'll be able to ask questions about this subject during our future discussion on the case that we're looking at, because I think there might be questions that arise then. Yeah.
Thank you.
thank you.
Appreciate your time.
Right here.
Would Clay, Brittany, would you all like to take a few minute break, or would you like to? Let's do a 2 or 3 minute break and then reconvene. It's 6:07. Let's come back at 6:11. All right, we're going to hand it over to Rob now, who's going to give us a case summary, and then we'll start our first round of discussion.
Clay, I'm gonna need you to give me the high sign if you can't see it, and I'll turn the owl off. So I'm not gonna run the slideshow because that never works. So we've got a case review, and there's allegations regarding use of position authority, conduct, neglect of duty, and integrity. Is that good, Clay? Can you see the summary of facts? All right, perfect. The owl hates me, so this is a good day. Summary of facts. On March 18th, 2023, Officer E and Officer A responded to a vehicle crash which involved 2 vehicles. One vehicle was driven by the witness. The witness's vehicle struck another vehicle with 5 occupants, 2 adults and 3 children. Officers determined that the witness was at fault for the vehicle accident and determined he or she may have been under the influence of intoxicants. Officer A conducted field sobriety tests and arrested the witness for driving under the influence of intoxicants, DUI, and reckless endangering. Officer A transported the witness to Eugene PD headquarters, conducted 2 breath tests with the CMI intoxilizer alcohol analyzer, and learned the witness had a blood alcohol content of 0.297 and 0.295. While Officer A processed the witness for DUI, the 2 engaged in personal conversations and flirtatious behavior. After the witness processing was completed, he or she was provided with the necessary documents for the incident, given Officer A's business card, and was released from custody. An Uber ride was arranged for the witness to depart from Eugene PD headquarters. Officer A and the witness began telephonic communication shortly after the arrest. During a 3-week period, they exchanged 1,420 text messages, 19 video and picture messages, and 26 phone calls. Officer A utilized his or her department-issued cellular telephone to communicate with the witness and communicated with him or her primarily during work hours. Officer A also contacted the Oregon Department of Motor Vehicles and tried to prevent the witness's license suspension. In Officer A's internal affairs interview, he or she denied engaging in a relationship with the witness, stated his or her desire was to help the witness, and acknowledged the number of communications between the two was significant. So we had 5 allegations. So the first one was use of position authority that Officer A inappropriately used. Sorry, make sure I read this right. That Officer A inappropriately used his or her position to obtain personal gain for the witness and or to help the witness avoid the consequences of his or her legal acts when he or she contacted the Oregon Department of Motor Vehicles and requested that the witness license not be suspended. And we also have conduct that Officer A did not conduct himself, herself in a responsible and professional manner when he or she engaged in a personal relationship with the witness, which he or she solicited through the use of his or her official capacity as an employee of the Eugene Police Department. And then we have the third one, neglect of duty, that Officer A neglected his or her official duties when he or she engaged in personal business with the witness, including but not limited to sending numerous text messages and taking part in lengthy personal phone calls while on duty. Have integrity. The fourth one, that Officer A deleted electronic communications from his or her department-issued cell phone after he or she was told to stop contacting the witness, which compromised his or her honesty. And the fifth one, final one, integrity, that Officer A engaged in a personal relationship with a person he or she arrested, compromising the integrity of the underlying criminal proceeding, as well as his or her own integrity and that of the Eugene Police Department. And then for adjudication recommendations, so we have for the first 3, for the auditor recommendation, sustained. The fourth one, insufficient evidence. Chain of command, first 2 sustained. Then we have 3 and 4, insufficient evidence. Chief final, first 3 sustained, insufficient evidence. And then the 5th one was sustained recommendation across the board, and the chief sustained it. So then the issues for y'all's discussion. So it was an internally generated complaint, got allegations of the use of position, authority, conduct, neglect of duty, integrity. And then there are the relevant sections, and we just went over the adjudication recommendations. And then here are the materials that we provided for y'all to review for tonight's discussion. And then that is my straightest picture I can take of the door.
It
And
improves every time.
I will start. It's much better than it was at first. That one felt like we're on a boat.
It's a good door.
Yeah,
It's about transparency.
yeah, so. Now I will stop sharing and let y'all take it away.
Thank you, Rob.
Yes.
We're gonna have our discussion in 3 rounds, and the first round of discussion, Nick will try to tell on, and we'll, ask you to comment on intake, classification.
Okay, so no general comments going around. I'll just combine. So generally, I don't think much of what happened in this case surprises me. I think it reflects the data that I've been talking about on this board for a while. It reflects the data that's happening nationally that I've been speaking about here for a while. I also feel like I don't know much about what really happened. All I know is that they spoke a lot. I don't know what they spoke about because they were deleted. Those are my general comments. With regard to complaint intake classification, I like the way that this case was reported. I appreciate that it was internally generated. I think it's important when officers when things are heard in the community that people should speak up, and whenever an officer hears about it, they should make a formal complaint regardless of how murky that process might be. I also thought the investigation was solid. I appreciate the questions from the IA sergeant and from the associate auditor. I also appreciated the effort that went into this case because I recognize that not too much bad happened. It's not the worst case we've seen. It's not the worst that could have happened. But it's still the effort that was put in demonstrated this kind. Something that is notable and generally not appropriate. I think. It for this one.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I had one clarification to make. So we don't have access to the details of photos, videos, because they were deleted and that's why. So that, and then actually my other comment is another question. Can you explain the distinction between the conduct adjudication and the second integrity? Why both of those are called out and how those are.
Let me pull it up.
Are you talking about the allegations that are both classified into the same, both 103.5.9?
So, well, maybe, but the conduct one, the second one, the very last one.
Okay.
Yeah, just curious to get clarity on.
Yeah, I mean, well, so when this came in, just talking to Leah, she felt that it was more than just conduct, that it was integrity issue, the contact between the officer and the witness. So that was why she wanted to add that second, that integrity, because of the seriousness of it. Because it's not like you just had a bad day. It's more than that, kind of. Not a real good, easy way for me to define it.
So beyond
The egregiousness of it, I guess, is the best way to describe it.
Thank you, Brittany. Clay?
Yeah, I'll just mention that Brittany's voice and other voices are really difficult to hear for some reason, and I'm not sure why. Like maybe there's something in the way of the microphone. I can hear Rob really easily, so I don't know if the mic is closer to, yeah. So not just for me, but for the listening public, if there are any. I don't know if there's anything to do about that. For intake classification and monitoring, I think the intake actually speaks to the integrity that is there in the police department and in our community, because it's not a police department employee who first reported it was a spouse. And so even just like the extension of that to me is telling that there's a lot of people who are, actively engaged in the integrity of the department. And I think that that's an important thing to note. And then that the investigation ensued appropriately. I think it's very thorough. The amount of material that we reviewed in this case was generous, and so I think the investigation went well. I guess I could look at all the policies and sort of think about other opportunities for appropriate classifications of allegations, but I sort of think the mixture of them was appropriate to the issues at hand. So I asked myself whether like truthfulness would come into play, but I sort of think that integrity gets at what you might be asking in that realm. So yeah, I think it's a set up well.
You, Clay. I also had a question about, I agree, I think that the classification, intaking classification, I agree with that. Could you open up the reasoning as to why it wasn't a dishonesty classification?
I think it was something that you couldn't, integrity versus dishonesty. I mean, I think it could go kind of one way or the other, but just because of the unknown, because the officer was spoken to by a supervisor, I mean, I think that impacted it. So instead of dishonesty would be more of. There's my read on it, and I can't speak for Leah, but more of like a plausible understanding of the officer's actions because of the communications that the officer had with the supervisor. So that would why it would fall in kind of the lesser integrity, still serious, but
Yeah.
the lesser integrity versus something more like dishonesty.
I mean, I really appreciate the really difficult nuanced nature of this, and I don't believe that the police auditor is out to blow up anybody's career. And I feel like this was the right measure of accountability. And I just for anybody watching. Wanted to give the auditor's office the opportunity to tease out that nuance. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yep.
I wanted to also thank Sergeant Peckles for what I thought was a great interview. I picked up on some of the comments that you made that I think anybody who read this might also be thinking, like you said, you had mentioned, I'm not going to be verbatim here, but about the number of text messages, you said that's a lot. And again, I appreciate the really nuanced approach here to the investigation, knowing that this is a kind of weird one. Yeah, so thank you. I thought that intake was great. I also like to see that this was, if I'm correct, blue team initiated. Yeah, so that's always a win to be able to communicate that to the public. So thank you. All right, the next round of discussion we have is for policies, procedure, and training. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, just double checking. It's been a whole year this week, so please take us away on this one.
What I noticed and was kind of curious about, and I think when we kind of got to this after someone was questioning earlier too, around bias training. What caught my attention was the officer's perception that the witness was more likely telling the truth than others. And like percent a couple of times in reference to the witness. So I was just curious, kind of thinking out loud, I guess, but you know, that seems to then impact how the officer proceeded in wanting to let the witness off easier, which I put in quotes. So I'm assuming is also with in the report somewhere, and how officers are trained to be aware of internal bias that might identify when someone looks and acts as being quote normal with someone else, because that felt problematic to me. And then I was also curious about why it was that the officer was unaware of the witness's previous DUIs, at least initially. And that seemed in your talk about the training to be an indicator on if someone's issued a ticket or watch in jail, like that's a factor there. A lot of kind of the measures taken or offered to try to lighten the consequences essentially. Seems like that would be impacted if that's that the witness actually did have previous DUIs, and that is that something that's checked like early on and easily accessed when upon like kind of early interactions.
Okay. What I would say is that not all officers know to check that, but for a lot of people that are proficient in DUI, that have done a lot of DUI investigations, they will call up to records and say, hey, can you run a rap sheet, which is like a CCH, a criminal history report. And that is where we can see, oh, they've had how many DUIs, because in Oregon, if you have more than, or what is it, your third DUI within 10 years, and that's including any state, it would be a felony. So A lot of people have gotten in the habit of doing that, but not everybody does, and they leave it to the DA or the city prosecutor to, adjust the charging misdemeanor felony. And so neither's right or wrong, both of them get people there in terms of like, it's an appropriate case resolution, it's just. Not everybody knows to do that, or in all of the litany of different steps to do DUIs now, they don't do that necessarily, so. I mean,
Yeah, I guess so in that case, just because the officer did seem to take steps for lightening the consequences. Seems that should be something. That step should have been taken because there was some reactive decisions. The other direction, not towards Bruce's though. Like, that's not what it easier. Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Brittany.
Can I have one last question? So when someone shows up to a DUI and they like know who the suspect is, does their arrest record not come up?
So dispatch, if somebody errs, this is who you're out with, this is your suspect, or the person runs that person through the radio and dispatch does a records check. They will air relevant officer safety information. They may, provide other details that dispatch is not going to rattle off, oh, they were arrested for DUI this many times in this county or this city, whatever. The officer would probably need to look that up, but then they're gonna be limited to just what their EPD contacts are, and that's not necessarily gonna provide a full picture, because obviously we live in Eugene, people are in Springfield, they're in Crestwell, Oak Ridge, Junction City, I mean, different areas that have, I guess Crestwell's county, but, and then also we don't have access to, Lane County Sheriff's Office, their system is on a different system, so we can see Eugene and Springfield. And some U of O, I think now, limited, but yeah, so did that answer?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
So, sorry, I might have not fully comprehended a thread of that. So does that mean that, because I'm thinking about what I would recommend to the police commission as something to consider for a policy recommendation. So would it not actually be useful to have a training requirement that in a DUI case, you would look up this history, because we have a lack of information from all jurisdictions where this might occur, and that the charges could change in the DA's office once they get all of that information? Or would it be yeah, I guess that's my question, rather than having an or.
Is it useful? Is it would it be useful for that to be part of the process? Or not, because we only have Eugene's information?
I mean, I don't know that it would solve the whole issue, and I don't know that tying officers into doing that reliably is going to change the fact that they're still gonna have to utilize discretion on, the or lodging or not lodging. The DA's always potentially going to change the charges, and they're gonna drop certain ones and charge other things. There's also one other document that Sergeant Griffith reminded me. When we're on our way to the headquarters, we have our dispatcher print off this thing called a DO7, and that is a DMV administrative document. And that says, that can be an indicator if somebody has been arrested before for DUI, because it's gonna change their suspension period. So that's the document that, they pass the breath test, they don't get suspended. They fail the breath test, they get suspended for this amount of time. And different people get different time periods on it, just because, they've the CHL or a CDL. I'm sorry, it's been a long day. A CDL, and that changes your suspension period. Or if you have previous DUIs, you might not be eligible for even a temporary permit and driving, but you just may be suspended right away. I don't know if that answered your question, Clay. I'm sorry. And
That's okay. Yeah.
Right.
I think, because I agree with what Brittany was saying, is this officer used their judgment based on the integrity of the person they were arresting, or that, the person who got the DUI. And that has issues with regard to what Brittany was mentioning too about, you know, internal bias, but it's also like not factual. And so if there was a way for that, officer to access all of the relevant information, I think we should make that sort of a mandatory or like a training topic, or like, you know, it's always hard to have mandatory information to gather, but maybe a recommended pathway to gather as much information as possible in those circumstances to avoid the this kind of circumstance where you're relying on, you know, the integrity of someone's word about whether they previously had a DUI or not. So I guess that's what I'm trying to dig into, and it sounds like it's there's a complex system of information out there that's not always accessed in a uniform way by each individual. And it sounds like that might be not a clean pathway to that information, and instead it requires a longer sort of investigatory period that the DA can sort of help with. Would that be your assessment, that really it's not something you can immediately access right away, even if you wanted to necessarily?
Right away. It takes some digging into that, and so it can be a complex system. And also we're relying on computer systems that aren't always, like on weekends especially. I know sometimes LEDs goes down and you can't search people's DMV records. It's rare, but it happens. I don't know, what are some other scenarios? Yes, please.
The state returns can vary so widely that our initial return, we don't get anything out of state, so we don't know. This person could have 12 duties from Michigan, whatever scenario is out there. We don't get that initial return, so it requires an extra digging. So with the state-to-state returns, that kind of what Sergeant Jordan was speaking to, then we have to request the CCH. And that is not something on the street that you're likely going to get right away. It just requires that extra investigative step after. It's certainly not something in most scenarios that before you're doing the field sobriety test that you're going to have that information. Oh, this person got arrested for a duty in Washington State a month ago. You're likely not going to know that. I don't know if that clarifies it or not, is it?
Okay, that's helpful. I don't think I have those were kind of the two areas of questioning that I had. The question about bias training and you know, identification with an individual based on, you know, sympathetic factors and how that can lead to different outcomes for different suspects or different offenders. So I think that is problematic, and I'm not sure how that's addressed, but then this question of access to information and sort of how facts can alter a process, or when they come into play to alter a process. I guess the other question that I could have asked earlier more generally, but I wanted to ask related to this case is about the role of a police officer in asking for dismissals. And I think you all talked about it a little bit, and I might have missed some of the details because I'm on Zoom. But the emails that the officer sent to the DMV to ask for the case not to move forward, and I guess I was curious, like how the mechanism of that works. And someone mentioned that there's still going to be a criminal case that goes forward, but what is the outcome when a DMV case stops, even if the criminal case would go forward in a Dewey situation?
I think it would make most sense for Sergeant Peslis to answer, since he has all the specific details about the case. Just to let you have the hope.
Thank you.
With the DMV hearing, that's specifically the suspension. So if you get it canceled, then realistically there won't be suspension at that time. Again, once you go through the criminal process, the judge still has the opportunity to suspend the license.
Okay.
At that. So that's all it has to do with. It's just the suspension of the license.
And according to policy or training, is it within the realm of reason for an officer to ask for that DMV process to not go forward while the criminal case moves forward?
I guess here's how I can explain that. I was kind of shocked when I heard it needed to be the chief signing off. But the reason I was shocked is because it's never something that I've done in my career. It's not generally done. However, occasionally, depending on the depth of the criminal charges, it has occurred. And typically there's gonna be like manslaughter charges, some very serious charges, in the criminal world that we don't want to go into a DMV hearing where you basically have the officer, the investigator, could be a detective. More likely that's gonna be the officer, the arresting officer for that day. They're representing themselves. We don't have an attorney there. The arresting officer doesn't have an attorney there. And a lot of times the defendant does have their attorney. So now you're potentially having discovery that can be brought into court later on. So
Yeah.
those are the times where I've heard that they've been canceled, requested to be canceled, so we don't have any discovery issues in an administrative hearing that could be detrimental to the criminal case.
Okay, and then as a follow-up to that, and I'm not sure where I would ask this question other than here, but I was a little confused about why that DMV case got canceled regardless, even though they said that it wasn't up to the officer. Does anyone know the answer to that?
I'm not clear on that either.
Okay.
I think the administrative hearings office just decided to go with the officer's request. It's kind of how I took it.
Even after,
That,
Yeah.
that's how I remember it too.
Okay.
The DMV person used discretion was how, when we talked about it.
okay, that's
The
helpful.
exchange,
Oh, sorry.
the exchange emails, and we did get that. There was
Oh, okay. So there was conflict.
from the officer to DMV, it was all electronic, so we got all that.
Although it sounded like the response from the DMV was that there was no, the officer couldn't request that on their own. And so it wouldn't proceed, but then it just happened. I don't know, somehow. So somehow with the information that the officer provided, the DMV decided that they would not pursue the cancellation of, or, whatever the case outcomes were. Okay, that's helpful. I guess I'm not sure if there needs to be a policy or training recommendation from us about the fact that I'm a little lost as to what to recommend. It seems sort of like an outlier in terms of choices made in this case. And so I don't know if there's a specific training topic that I would recommend or policy change that I would recommend. That's as vague and specific as I can be, sorry.
Thank you, Clay. Sergeant Jordan, can I pose a question to you?
Sure.
Do you think we need training on deleting text messages from service phones? Or is that intuitive in your mind that we wouldn't do?
We have policies about deleting emails. I don't know if that should be considered in the same vein, but as far as I know, we don't necessarily have a policy on that specifically.
There's public records, the Oregon public records, just like emails and anything else that's written down. So there is already policy about deleting public records from your work.
Right. It's
Which is why I have this.
right, it's I'm just wondering, do you think that is that intuitive enough? Or do you think that that's something that needs to be encoded in policy?
Specific opinion about it, and
Can you ask about it?
I don't really know.
How about your professional opinion?
I would say that, if there's a recommendation to do that, I think it's, within something we could accomplish if, everybody's on the same page about it. I don't, yeah, I don't.
Okay.
It may not hurt to remind them that they're public records.
Given the seriousness of deleting public records, yeah, okay.
They
I think that should maybe be an open topic of conversation. Maybe not. Is this something that you see other officers doing? Is there a pattern of this?
This is the first that I didn't think of off the top of my head.
Yeah, okay. I'm promised I'm not trying to like do any cross-examination here. Even as it might come across like that, because. Again, I do believe that there was integrity in the investigation and I do appreciate your efforts. What I disagree with is the sergeant's classification memo that there can only be speculation as to why Officer A, just not. I think that is, excuse my language, bullshit. For example, the records show that we have an officer sending picture messages at 11:59 PM on 3/25. This is dick pic time. Again, excuse my language, but I don't really know what we need to be discussing in a professional manner. And on many of the days, we get a lot of messages after 200, is that 8 o'clock? 2100 is 9 o'clock? I'm getting that right?
Yeah.
It's a lot of messages late at night. Or later at night. I didn't cross-reference reference this officer's working hours. So.
If I recall, these were during his school.
Good.
He was still on clock.
Okay. Also not okay?
No,
Is that against a policy?
And that's for the neglected due to allegation. of
Gotcha,
payment
okay.
Because it was during work and not
Yeah.
productive.
I find it really I find it, I'm trying to find footholds to read the interview. Again, which I think you conducted, really well. On page 22 of 57, I hope it's okay if I just read from it. I asked Officer A, thank you. Yes, thank you.
I don't like redacting these.
No, thank you so much. Thank you. I need the guardrails. How many times they thought they texted, do we say suspect? Witness. They said, I'm not really sure, honestly, I feel like we were on the phone, probably more text. So I don't think I texted too much. Well, I guess we could speculate on what counts as too much. But 1,420 text messages, maybe it's just because I'm a millennial, but that seems like a lot even. And I don't like talking on the phone generationally. And then, a couple of paragraphs later. I'm just gonna read again. I asked Officer A why they deleted the text messages after speaking with. Is it okay to, Lindsay?
I would just put
Supervisor A, after speaking with Supervisor A. They said, quote, they basically had told me to stop contacting witness. And so I kind of just didn't want to think about it anymore. I wanted to be gone and move on with the job. I asked Officer A if they had concerns. They said no. They then asked about, and this is where I'm like, is this intuitive or is this dissimulation? And I think because I can't tell here, it's not that I'm wanting to really put a finger in an open wound, but to really kind of suss out if this was why I think I disagree with the sergeant classification memo that said, well, we can only speculate. Leaving this to speculation gives us insufficient evidence and that part, I think I disagree with that part. Given the kind of context clues that we have here. So yeah, it is a bit of speculation, but it's not and I don't think it's just necessarily guesswork here. So yeah, I don't know. Do we need to encode this into policy? I've been sitting on the civilian review board for a few years, and I don't think we've seen many any cases that I can remember where officers knowingly or unknowingly deleted or destroyed evidence. So that's why it kind of stands out to me, and thank you for letting me ask some kind of pressing questions. But I truly and sincerely appreciate you. I just think this one there's a lot of evidence to maybe this classification number here. But
If I may,
please, Mark.
I wasn't here when all this happened. The amount of leverage this officer had in this particular situation. And it almost probably got to a point where the leverage swung the other way. Given his, I mean, this wasn't a one-off.
Thank you.
This,
Somebody said it was an outlier earlier. We have no idea who it is.
this was predatory behavior
Right.
with a tremendous amount of leverage that you have control over. And at one point even use that leverage. I couldn't even only imagine if like someone I knew got arrested for DUI and I used my position as police auditor to reach out to the DMV and say, hey, we shouldn't probably suspend this person because I probably get charged. I know I wouldn't have a job. And I really thought that, you know, when the officer starts talking about, the supervisor starts talking about the officer being compassionate and caring, and it's like, maybe he does have a psychology degree, or a PhD in psychology that he can make this sort of clinical assessment. But I was very disappointed in the sergeant's lack of discussion of the amount of leverage this officer had and the advantages that he or she took with this leverage. I could use the same word as Jose. This case, very disappointing, and I think it's exactly as you stated earlier, why the public has why so many people in the public have a view of police officers and police departments are situations like this.
I mean, on page 23, the officer A mentioned that when pressed, began to like open up and say, thank you for asking the question. I asked what they did not want to think about. The response is just having contact with them. I mean, and then to go on, what it was, a lot of small talk, religion, politics, kids, family. I mean, we could do the guesswork of being very generous and say, yeah, maybe this is social work, but I think Brittany, I don't know what you would have to say about that per se, in terms of the level of care that we would want to extend to people. This is not necessarily my area of expertise. Could I ask you to speak to that?
You spoke to about your clients.
No, and my thought on that is, yeah, around self-disclosure, which in mental health, it is an intervention that you use intentionally and sparing to build connection or as appropriate, which I don't think any of those goals are really at play here from connection and rapport in this scenario. And I had thoughts for the next round, but kind of related around the DV piece, because I think that's relevant towards this claim of compassion. And the officer stated that the description of domestic violence happening and the witness quote asking for help was what prompted all of the steps taken. But in looking at the video footage, this is not to diminish violence in any way at all. I never saw the witness ask for help or even really seem in much great distress around their relationship situation. So I would just say I would kind of question the call on compassion too. And honestly, the compassionate thing to do is to treat someone fairly and consistently. And in this case, helping to keep this person safe and off the road would be compassionate.
I also, actually, is it still your turn? Okay.
Yeah, real quick, I just wanted to say thanks. Putting you in a spot like that, unprompted. Thank you. Please move.
In what section?
We are on section 3, recommendations. And adjudication.
I started.
I'm so sorry.
Training.
I'm so sorry.
But just back to this point about her asking for help. The way that her being a victim of domestic violence was brought up because he asked who she had at home. He was probing. Who do you have at home? Do you have a boyfriend, do you have a husband, whatever? That's how you found out about it. And when you talk about, thank you for mentioning the power position, as a police officer, let alone the fact that he has a gun, whether or not her case could have been dropped was potentially dependent on him. And I've said many times that for whatever reason, the data shows that if you are reporting that you violence, the likelihood that you will experience police sexual misconduct increases. So again, we don't know what happened here. And the witness is not claiming that anything untoward happened. But it could have very easily. And the other piece that was really frustrating, like when we talk about things that are weird, say that you don't see this often, so it's not maybe something that we should really be concerned about. But in fact, the things that might be intuitive, the non-formal things such as discretion or how to be appropriate when interacting with others, are something that should be formalized. We should be talking to officers about, or officers should be reminded, if they have not already been told, that it's not appropriate to speak to someone that you've arrested in any non-professional way that has nothing to do with the job. And there are many other things that we assume is intuitive or implied, and perhaps for some of us it is, but it still has to be told, because then we sit here and there's not much we can do about it otherwise. They weren't told ahead of time, or this isn't covered, or whatever. This case is predictable. We have no idea what's going to happen. That's it. With respect to training on this topic, I think that it would be helpful to talk about discretion in general. Like, when should you be providing discretion during it? Just based on what I heard already, one of those things you should not be like aiming to be lenient is if you've had that history of that. I didn't know that, but that's like one in every consideration that you could have made in this case, not have been, and she got into an accident, broken down to an accident. Her children isn't called. The accident wasn't that bad, but nevertheless, there's nothing, if the officer's job is to write, there's nothing preventing him. Yeah, so I think training recommendations around these informal.
Thank you. Brittany, will start this round with you. I'm so sorry. Try again. Clay, we'll start this last round on adjudication recommendation.
Okay. There are a lot of categories, and I think, are we taking the first round to just generally talk about adjudication, and then we say later if we agree in certain instances? Is that how we were doing it?
Yeah.
Okay, so I will talk generally. First, I think I have some disagreements with other board members about, I don't know, the assumptions we can make based on the facts we have. And I think that any kind of characterization of the officer's intentions are going to be guesswork. And maybe that's why the adjudication came down as it was for the chain of command with some of the allegations being was it unfounded or insufficient evidence, I think. Insufficient. And I'm trying to just backtrack to the actual facts that they have available, and without using a sort of assumptions about behavior, and instead trying to just go off of what evidence is available. I understand where that insufficient evidence sort of played out in two of those allegations. I think we can all agree that the behavior of this officer was not great, and there was a lot of misjudgments. But I don't not believe that they were concerned for the person that they were arresting and their welfare. I wasn't convinced that that wasn't the reason that they were doing what they were doing. And that for me sort of leads to this question of like, okay, I can see how an insufficient evidence is a plausible outcome for two of those allegations. I can also see the other side, to be clear, that like there's information that we don't have that we could have, maybe, that tells you that this was a completely inappropriate relationship and the concern was not for the other witnesses' family dynamics and safety, but instead for, a personal relationship gain. But I wasn't convinced by the facts of that. That was all, if I looked really deeply, that was all my assumptions. So in the end, I agree with the recommendations that the auditor's office and the chief ended up how they ended up adjudicating these. But I can sort of see the insufficient evidence that I can see the progression toward insufficient evidence that came up the chain of command. I hope that's clear. I hope that's clear. Good luck to whoever is taking minutes.
Thank you, Clay. I need to pose a couple more questions. Can I ask why the work phone wasn't seized in the first meeting with the supervisor?
I honestly can't say 100% why. I just think it was something that was overlooked in the moment, trying to kind of nip it in the bud right here and now.
Right.
That's my assumption that occurred.
Yeah. Because the supervisor, if I remember what the record says, was like he needed to knock it out. Kind of indicating that they knew that was, is it okay to assume that they knew that was out of policy or out of practice?
At least had the potential of, becoming a problem if it wasn't over.
Sure. Is there a policy now about seizing work phones in this situation?
I don't think so. I don't think anything specific is.
Yeah. Would you recommend that?
I think it's a bad idea.
Yeah.
But again, when it comes down to an investigation, realistically, I mean, it's kind of every investigation, I think there's something we could have caught that
Sure.
we missed.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what happened here. It's an unfortunate piece and it was a big piece.
Yeah.
I think there was some pieces of that whole thing that played into that. It was a newer supervisor in that position. Yeah.
And of course, not to come down on anybody, could have, would have, should have. I could have been a millionaire. I would have bought Google stocks. But I'm not living in Malibu. So yeah, I think that that could be a place where the policy beneficial in, I think, protecting officers in this situation. And that's what I think about most when I appreciate your comments, Clay, and I hear them. And I want to make space to say that there's absolutely room for that observation. I think that we are left in a situation to speculate, and that puts officers in bad positions. So, yeah, some kind of training or policy recommendation along those lines could help officers. I think about this as a labor issue just as much as a socially just issue broadly, that like we can protect officers by, yeah. I'm done.
I'll get to the adjudications in a second. With respect to assumptions being made, I think it is also an assumption to just believe what you're being told. That's also an assumption. I'm choosing not to make that assumption. With respect to the adjudications, I agree with each of them except for the, I think it's integrity, and that's with respect to why he deleted the.
Can you look down? Is that can you go down, sorry, to the adjudication record?
Oh,
Thank you. Is that the one you're looking for?
Yeah, so.
Okay.
Whichever state, so the last one, and that one was with respect to.
this one right there, about to delete the records.
So I think if this was an untruthful or truthful listener, we might have information. But the fact that the information was deleted, we have no idea what the conversation was, we have no idea what the pictures were, we can only go based off what he said, they said. It seems sustained to me. And then I agree with the other ones being sustained.
Couple of thoughts, just while that's fresh as far as the integrity of insufficient evidence about the deleting. The one thing that stood out to me was officers stating that they deleted with the assumption that it could be recovered. I didn't really know what to do with that, but I thought that that was kind of interesting. So that's the only one I actually didn't decide if I agreed. The rest I agreed with too. I felt like use of position authority, in addition to checking about past DUIs, also it seems that the 0.29 is exceptionally high, and that was discovered before the decision to outreach DMV was made, and should have indicated the severity of the behavior in the situation. I think conduct, I kind of already shared my concerns around the role of the domestic violence. I won't say claims, but kind of that factor and how that factors in, and the Clay's point, like I did catch kind of the tone of caring as well. But just think that muddied the water and complicated things. Wasn't the right choice in there. So it's behavior and response. And then as far as neglect of duty, I agreed, and just had the statement that if I sent that many texts, videos, and phone calls during my job, that would be problematic for me, just strictly on the amount of time it would take away from my work duties. And I should ask for, sort of, and then agreed with the final integrity policy.
Right. I guess I will start us off on this round for adjudication recommendations. And I will, this is again, state, and I'm a broken record here, understand how nuanced and difficult this one is. My suggestion is sustained on all allegations.
Great. I would have sustained all of the allegations.
Me as well, except for the degree.
Good.
Yeah, I agree with the auditor and chief of police's. Those were the same, right? With those.
Yeah.
The slate as they recommended, yeah.
Thank you. Okay, we are making great time. We have some time for the auditor's report now.
Sorry, before we go on to the auditor's report, can I ask another question about something that I was uncomfortable with? So, and maybe I misread this in the body worn video, but I read the interactions between the officer and the witness, I suppose, in this case, in the police department, as the witness instigating flirtation and the officer not responding. And I wanted to know if that is not commonly understood from the body worn video, because I think after that, who knows? Like there were many other things, but I think there were a number of circumstances where the witness said things and made advances, like asking the officer whether they were single, like talking about the breathalyzer in insinuating ways. And I didn't read a response from the officer. I'm not like, I don't care that the witness did that, but what I sort of cared about was the presentation of the investigation said that the officer engaged in flirtatious behavior. And I found that to be not true in my like reading of the video. And so I just wanted to know if other people read it differently, or Sergeant Peckles, if in your review of all the video, if you sort of read it differently, that there were two ways that this was being flirtatious in those encounters. And this doesn't change my sort of findings. It was more about the lead up to the presentation of the case. So to us.
I'll be totally honest, I would have to go back and watch the video.
Okay.
It's been a year since I wrote it.
Totally fair.
I didn't dig through the whole thing today, so.
Yeah, fair enough. So maybe if other board members feel differently from watching that interaction, yeah.
The thing about, things like this is people move in and out. And with predators, that's been the situation. I felt that there were some moments where definitely rebutted her. He wasn't saying anything. Especially when they were departed, she like held his hand. Like, tried to get away. That doesn't mean anything. That does not mean that he didn't abuse his power. He was the person in power. There's no law that says that a person who's being arrested can't be flirtatious with the officer. There should be policy that an officer can't do that. It's up to the officer. Who cares what she was doing? I don't care what she was doing. It was irrelevant.
Yeah, I guess Monique, that doesn't really get to my question. Like my question is not, I don't think it matters whether she was flirtatious or not, or whether the witness was flirtatious. I think they could be, and that's okay. It also, I agree that there is similar to how I agree with the sustained allegations that there was misconduct by the police officer, for sure, that there was an inappropriate behavior that ensued with the number of text messages and phone calls and misuse of power. I guess my issue is I don't know that I want the facts of the case to be misrepresented in the presentation of the case to us. And so that's why I want to just clarify, like, I think we need to be really clear about what was wrong and what didn't occur also. And I personally didn't see, and I'm totally willing to be wrong about this because it was a lot of video and a lot of investigation, but I didn't see inappropriate behavior flirtatious behavior during the time that they spent together when the body worn video was there. So if that is untrue, I'm 100% open to being corrected about that.
I thought I said, I might have not said when I started, but I said that he was flirtatious in some moments and not. It does not necessarily have to remain consistent throughout. Yeah, that's my view.
I have thoughts as well. It is difficult because you cannot see the officer's face or how any sort of nonverbal messaging that is relayed back. And I would say the self-disclosure conveys a degree of intimacy that would invite that type of flirtation.
Yeah.
But not being clear is invitational.
Sorry, you broke up a little bit, but I think I got what you said. Yeah. The other thing that I think we should be considering going forward then is that I think officers probably use that kind of invitational behavior to get to a rapport with suspects, I would guess, sort of like not so dissimilar from your work, Brittany. Obviously, there are like layers of that and boundaries that should be a part of that. And probably every officer has different levels of boundaries. Some are much more reserved, I'm sure, and some are much more forward. But just as we're continuing to review, I would be cautious about saying there is no like level of conversational relationship that should ensue with people who officers come into contact with, just based purely on observation of how policing has been done, and that can be an important factor in protecting public safety and also engaging with people who are out in the world. So there's definitely a level of there's definitely crossing boundaries that is happening here that I don't think should always happen, but I wouldn't want to rein that in so far that an officer is suddenly a brick wall to everybody they come into contact with.
I have a question, and Clay, I know you're not saying this, but I feel like sometimes when we talk about the things that are appropriate, not in this setting, that then people will respond with, oh, well, now I'm just not gonna speak to anybody anymore because I'm gonna make them feel uncomfortable. That's not what we're saying. I don't think that officers should not do police work. I'm curious, what is the expectation about officers interacting with somebody that they've arrested?
Questioning.
What is the expectation? I'm assuming that there's no policy about officers interacting, communicating with somebody that they've arrested. Yes.
I mean, keeping it professional, but again, I think that's dependent on the situation. Trying to keep someone calm who just witnessed a family member's death or something, I might be able to personal. I think it's total situation with them. So there's no real exact criteria, I guess, that we tell them, other than to keep it professional. Yeah.
Can I put in my 2 cents? Like,
Please.
it's been a while since I watched this video also, but I completely agree with Brittany's point that we have one perspective visually. And it's from the officer's point of view. So we are missing whatever percentage of life is nonverbal communication, which makes it very difficult to gauge some of those interactions. There was at the very, very end of the video, right, as the person's being handed off to the taxi, sort of a lingering physical touch that seemed odd. But I think, Clay, your point is well taken. How we characterize a description of an activity that we witness in a body camera is worth very carefully analyzing. So there are ways that we could describe something like self-disclosure or a lingering physical touch that is not characterizing it as flirtation. Does that make sense? We can be more descriptive and attribute less motive or read less into it and still get at the information that we need to prove or disprove the allegations that in a way that may muddy the water less. So it's worth thinking how we characterize what we describe, how we describe what we're seeing sort of as factually as possible without some of that maybe more charged language. Does that capture what you're saying?
I feel like I'm channeling some of the attorneys who are on this board in that question. Yeah, so totally, like if there's more specific, maybe specific language that are more easily understood from the evidence, yeah, that would be helpful. And to be honest, I had to stop the video about a minute and a half before it ended because I went into a meeting and then I don't think I watched the end. So I missed that very specific thing that you mentioned. So that's helpful. And totally agree on the observational viewpoint from the camera too. Yeah.
Thank you, Clay.
We've had conversations about how things are being framed. I mean, I did see, like, I think you have referred to her as being very grateful, and I think that's subjective. There are all kinds of subjective things being written in this report. They're written by people. But I do think that it's that's something that we can keep in mind moving forward. I'm often seeing it and it being applied in a different way than what you talked about right now.
Yeah, I just want to say, since we're, writing the addendum right now, that I appreciate your reminder, Brittany, that, the VAC here was 0.29 and being exceptionally high, does add a level of both vulnerability and subjectivity here. I was struggling on how to, I wasn't gonna mention this, but I was struggling on how to talk about how, yes, an officer has a responsibility to be gain compliance, which I think sometimes is what we'd like to see happen is through language rather than through force. And show care when appropriate and in the appropriate measure. And also at the same time, was struggling with trying to use humanizing people first language that would describe this drunk person's role in initiating sexual advances, like talking about the breathalyzer that appeared to be trying to gain favor. So both of those things were happening, but I didn't want to be able to talk about that without making it stepping into some kind of like victim blaming language, given the nature of like these like asymmetrical violations, right? So I just wanted to say that I struggled with thinking about how to describe those things, but I appreciate it. Yeah, here for that. Are there any other final comments regarding? Okay. With that in mind, we're going to shift over to the auditor's reports. Then we'll have public comment, closing comments, and we'll adjourn. Please take it away.
Mark, if there's anything you want to say, how much time do we have?
We are at time, but we are going in more efficiently than we do for other specific.
Planning is scheduled for like 10 minutes is what you have, if you want to give us a report.
I'm new.
Hardly.
For millions of viewers worldwide, let's not forget about the
Spanish Community Resource Fair.
Spanish
We changed the
community.
name, so. Formerly known as Public Safety.
And just want to know. I don't know how many years ago, maybe about 8 years ago. I had conversations with some of our elected officials about reaching out more to the Latinx community and was able to facilitate bringing Beatrice on board. And at the time, I think our first public safety forum, we had two firemen and somebody from Waterworks and E-Web and a few police officers and maybe about 30 people, if that many, that came to this, and it's evolved into more than 30 community organizations now. And she'll never take much credit for it, but all the hard work, all the heavy lifting has been done by Beatrice, and it's done a fantastic job. And I think we get well over 100 people, maybe well over 200 people.
The high was 300.
300.
It varies.
There you go. And just has done just a fantastic job, and I hope folks can come out. And I can't really say invite anybody in Spanish, and I don't know how many are watching, but just a tremendous amount of work on her part, and I think it's really done a great service to the community. And there's a lot of different places and a lot of different people that could have got this started, and it never got started. And it got started here, and it got started because of her hard work, and it's really flourished in our community. Heck of a hire.
Here.
Today.
I don't think you need a raise. There's like a new job classification, all kinds of stuff there.
All right.
Thanks, well, just beyond that, we're just gonna dive in. I've known Lindsay for a long time. person. Rob is new to me, so. Just, I realize I come in sometimes. Where they're hard and fast because they want to get a lot of things done, and council was very gracious and invited me back, and. It's good to be back and it's good to do this work. And, I think what's also to recognize is the chief has a lot of new people on his leadership team. That, we need to get them to a place to recognize the value of their leadership. Some civilian oversight agencies always just like to go for that lowest person. And never really get management to recognize their responsibilities and their duties. And the importance of them reporting incidents and things like that. And so that's what I really strive to do. And with his new team, I will strive to do that again. And with the great work of Lindsay and Rob as well. So we're going to be very much involved in those kinds of things, at least on the time that I'm here. I don't know how long we'll be there.
And then can I add just a couple informational things? So you will have a new CRB member to replace, not to replace, but to take Bernadette's old seat, which is an unexpired term. It's a short term, right? So it'll be filled from whenever council makes their appointment, which could be as soon as November 25th. That's when they're going to make their next vote on that, through June of next year. So if the person likes it, gets their feet under them and wants to apply for a full term, they could do that in January. The same goes for any of you whose terms are coming up next July. You have to reapply and council will consider you as part of their appointment process. So I will look you up and get all the details, but just to put that in your mind, if you know that you're kind of coming up towards the end of your term, you can reapply up to 3 times in a row before you term out. So keep that in mind. Council can vote to appoint the person who was recommended by the community panel that met to review the applications to fill Bernadette's unexpired term. They can vote to ask people to make statements or like do a short interview, or they can vote to appoint any of the eligible applicants. So that action will happen on November 25th, so soon. The other thing is that the auditor position is open. So Mark is here filling in the gap, and then the permanent auditor position is open on the city's website. So the Employee Resource Center has asked that we continue to let people know about that. It is live, and the closing date for that application right now is listed as January 1st of 25. So if any of you have people in your networks you think should apply, you can direct them to the city's website and all the information is there. If they have any questions or would like to talk to us, we're always happy to. I think that's all the boring factual information.
Thank you.
Yep.
Do we have any community members in this?
We have our 2 usual, so I don't think they'd like to make public comment, but if you'd like to, now is your chance. Which, no. Okay, all you.
No script necessary?
No script.
Okay. We have time now for closing comments. I think I started the last round. Would you like to close this out?
Okay, I got too many closing comments in here. Still, I'm just keeping an eye on the Pride event for next year. I'm sure it's gonna happen. Thank you for giving the presentations. So I'm learning a lot. For meeting again.
We'll just echo that. Thank you for sitting here to like a feistier conversation, I think. You know. I appreciate the civility.
Sorry, I'm remote. I will try to be there in person next time. I think it's better. And yeah, thanks for the really thorough investigation and for the robust conversation about it. I think this is a really productive and interesting board to be on because it's complex issues with many facets of societal implication. So I appreciate that. Thanks.
I'd like to also and continue to highlight the work that Beatrice, Rob and Lindsay do. They're never gonna get enough recognition for the work that they put in maintaining, community sense of justice, in the city of Eugene. So really shout out to you all and appreciate you. Thank you for returning, Mark, and coming back to the dark, cold Pacific Northwest. Maybe perhaps drier, possibly, if it is November. Yeah. Thank you, Sergeant Jordan. Really appreciate your time. Sergeant Benz, thank you for the investigation, and Lindy and Owen, thank you also for your time and being here. I really appreciate it. I think that gives us what we need to adjourn. It's 7:30. We'll see you all in December, possibly. Do we meet in December?
We usually do
Yeah.
it in